Okay, welcome to another treatment of the International Sunday School lesson. Today's lesson is entitled Free to Worship, and it's taken from Ezra, the 6th chapter, verses 1 through 12. It's for the spring quarter, lesson number 2, March 13, 2022. Now, a little background information. We have been studying about the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem after the Babylonian captivity, and we're continuing on with that study. And the work had started, and there had been some folks that had given them a hard time and had made complaints to the king of Persia, and the work had been halted a few times. And these troublemakers had gotten some counselors who were behaving more or less like lawyers do today, and we're working on behalf of the people that were paying them, and were telling the king of Persia all kinds of things about how bad the Jews were and how it would be not in his best interest to let them rebuild their kingdom or rebuild their temple. And so they had also suggested that an extensive search be made in the archives of what kind of people these Jews were and their history, and that actually didn't work out well for them. We see in Ezra 4:11 through 16, this is a copy of the letter they sent him. To King Artaxerxes, from your servants in Trans-Euphrates, the king should know that the people who came up to us from you have gone to Jerusalem and are rebuilding that rebellious and wicked city. They are restoring the walls and repairing the foundation. Furthermore, the king should know that if this city is built and its walls are restored, no more taxes, tribute, or duty will be paid, and eventually the royal revenues will suffer. Now, since we are under obligation to the palace, and it is not proper for us to see the king dishonored, we are sending this message to inform the king, so that a search may be made in the archives of your predecessors. In those records you will find that this city is a rebellious city, troublesome to kings and provinces, a place with long history of sedition. That is why this city was destroyed. We inform the king that if this city is built and its walls are restored, you will be left with nothing in Trans-Euphrates. Now, they pretty much well had tried to build this big, huge case of how that if the Jews were restored and if the temple was restored, that the king would be out everything he could have expected out of Trans-Euphrates. But like I said, that didn't work out quite like they expected. Okay? Now, the Ezra 6, 1 and 2. Now, Darius then issued an order, and they searched in the archive stored in the treasury at Babylon. A scroll was found at the citadel at Megbatana in the province of Media. This is written on it, memorandum. Now, we know from the historian Herodotus that Ecbatana was a famous facility and that it was built by the first Median king and occupied the center place in town. And it was defended by 7 circles of walls, one on each inside of each other. So this was a really big deal, this particular place where it was found. And they found where the Jews had a legitimate claim and legitimately were um, given the ability and given the mandate to go restore that temple at Jerusalem. Ezra 5:13 through 17. However, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree to rebuild this house of God. He even removed from the temple of Babylon the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to the temple in Babylon. Then King Cyrus gave them to a man named Sheshbazzar, whom he had appointed governor. And he told him, "Take these articles and go and deposit them in the temple in Jerusalem and rebuild the house of God on its site." So this Sheshbazzar came and laid the foundation of the house of God in Jerusalem. From that day to the present, it has been under construction. It is not yet finished. Now, if it pleases the king, let a search be made of the royal archives of Babylon to see if King Cyrus did in fact issue a decree and rebuild this house of God in Jerusalem. Then let the king send us his decision in the matter. Now, that was the last search, and the search came up acknowledging that the Jews had full authority to be rebuilding that temple. Now, Ezra 6, 3, and 4. In the first year of King Cyrus, the king issued a decree concerning the temple of God in Jerusalem. Let the temple be rebuilt as a place to present sacrifice, and let its foundation be laid. It is to be 60 cubits high and 60 cubits wide, and 3 courses of large stones and 1 of timbers. The costs are to be paid by the royal treasury. So we see here how they found the actual decree where they were to rebuild that temple. Okay? And Cyrus had a lot of motivation to be receptive to the needs of the Jewish people. We know from what Josephus, the historian, the Jewish historian Josephus, says that Cyrus discovered that about 100 years before his birth, the Jewish prophet Isaiah named him by name in Isaiah 44 and 28, who says of Cyrus, "He is my shepherd, and he will accomplish all that I please. He will say of Jerusalem, let it be rebuilt, and of the temple, let its foundations be laid." So Cyrus saw where the prophecy was thereof about him to rebuild that temple. Now, Ezra 6 and 5, also the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to Babylon, are to be returned to their places in the temple in Jerusalem. They are to be deposited in the house of God. So we know from the biblical record how that Nebuchadnezzar, he had seen the riches that were in the temple and that were in the palace, and probably that's where his envy of those articles had grown from. And he had sent his army there to conquer Jerusalem. And when his army conquered Jerusalem, he had those treasures taken from Jerusalem, from the temple, and brought to Babylon. We know in 2 Chronicles 36 and 18, he carried to Babylon all the articles from the temple of God, both large and small, and the treasure of the Lord's temple, and the treasures of the kings and his officials. Okay? Now, Ezra 6 and 7, now then, Tattenai, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Bozenai, and you other officials of that province, stay away from there. Do not interfere with the work in this temple of God. Let the governors of the Jews and the Jewish elders rebuild this house of God on its site. So we see here where the Lord had given the king of the Persians the motivation, the impetus to let the troublemakers know that they were not to have anything to do with this, with destroying and hindering this rebuilding of the temple. And when the king of Persia tells you don't fool with it, you know not to fool with it, because he'll execute you. And that's what he was letting them know. Okay? Now, Ezra 6, 8 and 9. Moreover, I hereby decree what you are to do for these elders of the Jews and the construction of this house of God. Their expenses are to be fully paid out of the royal treasury from the revenues of Trans-Euphrates, so that the work will not stop. Whatever is needed, young bulls, rams, male lambs, for burnt offerings to the God of heaven, and of wheat, salt, wine, and olive oil, as requested by the priest in Jerusalem, must be given to them daily without fail. Wow. So not only did God give Darius the impetus to tell them not to hinder, but the king of the Persians also told them that they were to supply the daily necessities for the rebuilding and for the ongoing offering that was to be made in the temple. So God was taking the goods and services from the unrighteous and the unlawful and the evil and the troublemakers and giving it to the people that were set about to do the work of God. Okay, Ezra 6 and 10, so that they may offer sacrifices pleasing to the God of heaven and pray for the well-being of the king and his sons. Now, it's really important for us to sit and contemplate this a little bit and think about this. The king of Persia was interested in having the Jews pray for his wisdom, praying for his well-being. Now, let me be real clear and plain about a few things. First off, I could care less how you vote. I'm not trying to tell you how to vote. I'm not suggesting how you could vote or how you should vote or anything like that. But I am very strongly telling you, you should pray for the leaders of the land. It doesn't matter if the leaders of the land are a king or a queen or a monarchy, or if they are a parliament, or if they are prime minister, or if they are presidents, or they are governors, or whatever they are called, in whatever system of government you're in, it does not matter with regard to this mandate and this command. We are commanded. We are commanded to pray for the leaders of the land. And why is that? The reason why we are commanded to pray for the leaders of the land is because that baby in the crib, their welfare depends a lot of times on decisions that are made by those that are high up. The old folks in the old folks' home, their welfare depends on decisions that are made by the people who are in authority. That 18-year-old kid that is right at drafting age, his welfare, her welfare, depends on the decisions made by the people that are the rulers of the land. And we are commanded, regardless whether or not we think they are right or wrong or whatever, we are commanded to pray for them. God would give them wisdom to make the right decisions, that God would give them good success when they're doing the right things. For the welfare of the people, we are commanded. This is what Paul told Timothy in Timothy 2, 1 and 2. I urge then, first off, that petitions, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peacefully in quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. Now, it's important for us to fully grasp that the person who God gave to give us that command was the Apostle Paul. And the person people he was saying to pray for are the same people that executed him. So, this business about, I don't agree with them, I ain't praying for them, that does not hold water. It does not matter if you agree with them. It does not matter if you didn't vote for them. You are commanded by God to pray for the people who are in authority over you. Without fail, you are commanded to pray for them, because their decisions matter to that little helpless baby sitting in a crib. It matters to that little old person sitting in the old folks' home. It matters to that homeless person who is in a wheelchair and is out there begging for money and cannot work for a living. It matters for their welfare what's decided. So we are commanded to pray for the people who are in authority over us. Okay? Now, Ezra 11 and 12. Furthermore, I decree that if anyone defies this edict, a beam is to be pulled down from their house, and they are to be impaled on it. For this crime, their house is to be made a pile of rubble. May God, who has caused his name to dwell there, overthrow any king or people who lifts a hand to change this decree or to destroy this temple in Jerusalem. I, Darius, have decreed it. Let it be carried out with diligence. It's important for us to realize, it is important for us to realize that there are consequences for disobeying the laws of the land. You know, the Bible says elsewhere that the people in authority don't carry the sword in vain. And we need to be law-abiding citizens, unless that is a direct violation of the command of God. We need to live by the laws of the land. Okay? Now, in conclusion, we need to really remember that God is going to supply the needs that we need when it's the right time. Just like he did for the children of Israel here. Now, they struggled. They were starting and stopping a few times on rebuilding this temple, but God was supplying their needs to rebuild the temple, and he will supply our need. Now, there are two things for us to be sensitive about. First off is knowing what mission God wants us to be on. And the second one is being in the right time. Now, they were in captivity for about 70 years. If they had been in captivity for a month and a half and tried to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild that temple at the wrong time, they would have been a huge slaughter. We need to be sensitive of the right time. I'm going to tell you a little story on me. There was years ago, and I felt like the Lord was going to have a big crusade in a local park in town. It was the East Lake Park in town. I had got my friends together and had got bulletins printed up. I put up bulletins. We were going to do a Karate for Christ crusade at East Lake Park. We're going to do it in March. Well, that was the March we had the big snow. It was miserable that day. It was spitting snow. It was damp. It was brutally cold. We had nobody show up. The only people we had that even come by were a couple people wanted to know what we was doing at the park that day. They didn't even know anything about our big crusade. And my cousin, after it was over with, my cousin asked me, he said, Donnie, I know you said the Lord wanted you to have a crusade at East Lake Park. He said, but by any chance did you ask him what day? It looks like he has the wrong day. And so that's been a joke for us for over several years about I had the wrong day. Well, a couple of years later, Lord put the same thing on this other guy's heart, and he had the right day. And I am thrilled to tell you that me and my buddies, same buddies that were out there on that failed run for a crusade, we got to help participate in that. They had some churches that donated food. They had an all-day event. They had some great singing. They had all kinds of preaching. We got up there and gave our testimonies, broke some boards, jumped around, did a little karate demonstration, and there were a bunch of people who were saved that day. And because it was the right mission, I had the mission right, and it was the right time. So we need to be sensitive when God gives us a mission to do. We need to be sensitive that we do it at the right time. And that's what these Jews did. They came back to rebuild that temple at the right time. So you be praying, you be sensitive to the right mission at the right time. Well, friends, good Lord willing, I'll be back with you next weekend.